In 1904, the St. Paul Coal Company constructed a mining site. It was located in a mining town called Cherry, which was about 90 miles south of Chicago, Illinois. The Cherry Mine was opened on December 11, 1905, and only lasted around 4 years before a tragedy happened. The Cherry Mine disaster occurred on November 13, 1909. About 480 men and boys as young as 10 were working in the Cherry coal mine. Most of them were originally from Europe. All miners knew the risks of mining since an average of 5 to 7 miners died monthly in the Illinois mines. From 1901 to 1925, a total of 256 mining disasters occurred. A few include Stag Canyon No. 2 in New Mexico and Monongah Numbers 6 and 8 in West Virginia. Just in 1909, there were 20 coal mine disasters, the Cherry Mine disaster included. To put homemade kerosene torches on the walls of the mine. A torch began to drip kerosene onto some hay, which was intended for a mule stable. Sparks from pickaxes ignited a small fire when interacting with the kerosene. Miners noticed but left it alone for someone else to put out. Some workers turned on a fan in reverse, hoping to pull smoke out of the mine. This was a mistake and only made the fire spread throughout the tunnels. It set the wooden staircase, the one that was used in the escape shaft, ablaze. The only escape they had now is through the main shaft. In total, an estimated 259 men didn't make it out alive. There were 12 brave men that made multiple trips in the cages of the mine shaft to rescue the miners. They made 6 successful trips and rescued many men. Unfortunately, the 7th trip was fatal. The cage operator misread signals to pull up the cage. He left them down in the inflamed mine too long, and the 12 heroes burned up. The names of the men are John Bundy, Andrew McLucky, Harry Stewart, James Spires, Mike Sue, Robert Clark, Alexander Norberg, Isaac Lewis, Dominic Dormento, John Flood, John Smith, and Joseph Robesa. There were some miracles in this tragic story. 21 men were trapped and went into a different section of the mine to get away from the harmful air. 8 days later, a group of people dove into the mine to retrieve dead bodies. They rescued the survivors, who they named the 8-Day Men. The names of these men are George Eddy, Walter Waite, Thomas White, John Lorimer, Frank Waite, Thomas Brown, John Barnosky, John Semich, George Semich, George Stymez, Frank Sanarania, Q. Antonor, Daniel Holofcack, William Cleland, Fred Lawsey, Slivator Pigatti, Joseph Pigatti, Bonfiglio Ruggery, Fred Prohaska, and Frank Prohaska. The last man, Daniel Holovic, survived the mining disaster but unfortunately died the next day. Steve Stout, a schoolteacher and owner of Starved Rock Camera in Utica, said, "The image of that is just so horrific, I couldn't shake it. I had to write about it." He wrote the book Black Damp, the story of the Cherry Mine disaster. Karen Tintori also wrote a book called Trapped, the 1909 Cherry Mine disaster. People were in disbelief over the events at Cherry Mine. At the time, M. Donald, president of the United Mine Workers of Illinois, said, "The safest mine in Illinois, as the St. Paul Coal Company declared the Cherry Mine to be, has turned out a veritable death trap for 400 men. Gross negligence in constructing the mine, in defiance of all provisions approved by competent mining engineers, was the fundamental cause of the greatest mine disaster in the history of the United States." The Cherry Mine disaster, as well as other small mining disasters, changed mining history forever. In 1910, Congress inaugurated the United States Bureau of Mines. It monitored mine safety and was an enforcer of new technology and science in the mines. Though this agency was disbanded in 1955, those responsibilities are now handled by the United States Department of Labor. Illinois also enforced stronger mine safety rules by passing another law that turned into the Illinois Workmen's Compensation Act. The law firms of Katz, Friedman, Eagle, Eisenstein, Johnson, and Barrick summarized this act as follows. The Illinois Workers' Compensation Act provides the only legal remedy against the employer for a worker injured on the job. This outline is not a substitute for legal advice and should not be relied on without consultation with an attorney from our office. This is a brief outline of the Act. The Workers' Compensation Act Statute and thousands of court and Illinois Workers' Compensation Commission decisions interpreting it are quite complicated. The facts in every case make each claim unique. In Illinois, new training and certification is required to operate machinery in the mines. The disaster also enforced child labor laws, which prevent young boys from working in the deathly mines. The Department of Labor in the state of Illinois has a child labor law that says, "Child labor law regulates the employment of workers under 16 years of age." The law protects children by 1. Requiring employment certificates. The certificate confirms that a minor is old enough to work, physically capable to perform the job, and that the job will not interfere with the minor's education. 2. Prohibiting work in hazardous occupations. And 3. Limiting working hours. All work before 7 a.m. and after 7 p.m. is prohibited. However, work until 9 p.m. is allowed from June 1st through Labor Day. Not only did the disaster change laws, it changed people's lives forever. Families were left alone and heartbroken. A monument was developed on May 15, 1971, dedicated to the lives lost in the tragedy, and an annual ceremony is held on November 14th and 15th in Cherry, Illinois. Dennis Suttles, a genealogical research librarian at the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum, helped coordinate an exhibit called The Flames Caught Us, which contains at least 30 panels of artifacts based on the Cherry mine disaster, most of which came from the Princeton Public Library. One of the artifacts was an old pocket watch that belonged to Joseph Yearley, who was only 20 years old when he died in the mining disaster. The watch, which was in fairly good condition, had been passed down in his family through generations. Through time, the Cherry mine disaster has still impacted us today.